I'm very excited to first welcome up Dr. Rebecca Mitchell. Dr. Rebecca has been a researcher at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory for 6 years, where she developed optical meteorology tools for concentrating solar power, CSP. Collectors using algorithm development, theoretical modeling, and laboratory and field testing. She develops resource training and educational material to support knowledge sharing in the CSP community and helps lead Women Plus in concentrated solar group to promote the support in underrepresented genders in the industry. In her free time, she enjoys ultimate frisbee, dragon boats, which I always see on Sloan's Lake. I'm so curious about that. And trashy reality TV. Everybody, welcome up Dr. Rebecca.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here at Nerd Nite. So I'm going to be telling you about sun mirrors. So a bit about me. My background's in applied math. I graduated from CU Boulder like a lot of years ago now. And pretty much right after that, I started working at NREL. So started as an intern, then a postdoc, and now a full staff researcher doing concentrating solar power. And outside of that, I've played Frisbee for 15 years. I coached the Colorado School of Mines women's Frisbee team, and just started doing dragon boat, which is a lot easier on my body than Frisbee is. So I'm going to first explain what I mean by concentrating solar power, because when we talk about solar energy, you're probably thinking of this, right? So the solar panels that you see on people's houses or in large solar farms, which is what we call photovoltaic, or PV. Which is converting solar or sunlight into electricity. But this talk is not about that. Concentrating solar power is a whole other type of solar technology where we don't have anything to do with solar panels. We use these large mirrors to concentrate sunlight on a receiver so it can be stored as thermal energy. And so you can see these mirrors are curved. They're curved into a parabolic shape so they can focus sunlight at a single point and make it get super hot. So the analogy we use is like a magnifying glass roasting an ant. And there's a few different brands of this technology, but we're going to be focusing on Power Tower, CSP, which is where you have this large circular field of mirrors focusing sunlight at a receiver at the top of this tower in the middle. So a lot of people are unfamiliar with this technology, but there's some places that you might have come across it and you didn't realize it. The first, going back to antiquity, is Archimedes' burning mirror, which is a story where he lined up soldiers holding these big copper mirrors and used them to burn Roman ships. You also might have actually come across one of these plants driving through Nevada or California. So this plant, Ivanpah, is just outside of Las Vegas on I-15, I think it is. So if you drove by this and was like, what the fuck is that? It's a concentrating solar power plant. This is actually a big one. It's a 400 megawatt plant. They have over 170,000 mirrors, and they power about 150,000 homes a year. Playing SimCity? I've never played SimCity, so I don't know. My dad plays this a lot. He's probably gonna go build one right after this. This tweet from an astronaut last year that was cool, where she was actually able to spot the receiver tower from one of these plants from space. So you can see from this picture on the left, the receiver tower gets very hot and very bright. And so you can actually see it from space. This is Ashalim plant in Israel that she's seen here. And there were also some movies from the early 2000s that you may remember. So Sahara with Matt McConaughey, they have this dramatic fight scene on top of a actively lit solar tower in which they would have been incinerated immediately. And then Perhaps more unrealistically, there was a James Bond movie from the early 2000s. It was the last Pierce Brosnan one. It had Madonna, a song by Madonna, and The Vanishing Car and Halle Berry. But it also featured this large parabolic dish satellite made of diamonds that was used to concentrate sunlight to like burn a trench through Korea. So a concentrating solar power plant works by, we have this array of mirrors that's focusing sunlight on a receiver tower that has a heat transfer medium. So molten salt is the most common substance used for this for now. The salt gets superheated and then stored in a hot tank, and then it can be run through a heat exchanger and then a steam turbine and then used to generate electricity like a traditional traditional power plant. This salt gets super hot, so over 500 degrees Celsius. The next generation is trying to get hotter, above 700 degrees Celsius. And it's not super huge yet. It is about 7 gigawatts worldwide, but could be projected to grow up to 3 to 20% of the energy market. So it won't overtake the world, but could be significant. So why should we care about this technology? Why is it a good option for a renewable energy future? The biggest selling point is overnight storage. So photovoltaic PV has done a great job of getting much cheaper and is great at generating power during the day. But the problem is the sun goes down, people go home and they want to turn their lights on, and PV is not going to help you. But with CSP, you're able to store your power in this large hot tank and then use and sell power at peak times when the sun goes down. So that's a big advantage. It's mostly made of these easy to come by materials, so it doesn't involve the mining of any rare earth metals like other technologies. It's mostly just glass, steel, salt, and cement. And it's a great option in the US where we have a lot of cheap land and a lot of really great sunlight, particularly in the Southwest. So sounds neat, but why have we never heard about this? This technology, it's not exactly young. It was started in the 70s, but it hasn't really taken off. And there's a few reasons for that. The biggest being the costs. So CSP, still way too expensive. It has very high capital costs. It's just a lot of materials that needs to be schlepped out to the desert, a lot of complicated components that need to be installed and carefully calibrated. So that's the biggest priority of the industry, is trying to get the cost down. Another issue is it's developed a bit of a bad reputation. So CSP, though the technology is proven, it's been demonstrated to work. There's been some cases where it's been scaled up too quickly in very expensive plants, and some things have gone wrong that have caused costly repairs. So it's developed a bad reputation with financiers, so banks and insurance companies. And there's also a lack of international consensus on the best way to do things in the industry. So there's no established standards or practices. And an example of that is that the industry cannot agree on how big the mirror should be in the field. So you could see, right, this plant has these itty bitty little mirrors, and then this plant has these huge fucking mirrors that are like the size of a house. And both have advantages and disadvantages, but no one can decide on what size the mirror should be. So my work focuses on the solar field itself, which is the biggest component of these fields, made up of these large mirrors, which is really the fuel of these plants. And so heliostats are what we've referred to as the mirrors in the field that track the sun in 2 dimensions. As the sun moves throughout the day, we know that as light hits a mirror, it's going to go out on the same angle that it comes in on. And so the mirror just needs to be pointing in a direction that divides this angle in half between the sun vector and the target vector. But the problem is that these plants are very sensitive to any sort of errors in the mirror. So unlike photovoltaic, where if your solar panel's a little bit off, you're not going to be losing a lot of power. If these mirrors are off in their pointing or their shape, it can have bad repercussions for these plants. So to give you an idea, 0.2 degrees of mirror surface area can cause up to 10% plant efficiency losses, which for like a 100 megawatt plant like this is a lot of power to leave on the table when this power is very valuable and expensive. And that's because, right, some of these mirrors are up to a mile away from the target that they're focusing light at. But there's really no way to measure these mirrors when they're out in the field. Most of the measurement methods we have are when they're in the warehouse or the lab before they're shipped out to the field. But your ability to measure them in the field is really limited because there's thousands of them and they're spread out. To like have a guy drive out there, get on a lift and just put their finger on the mirror is like a 2-hour effort. They do have a method where they have each mirror shine their beam on this little box underneath the target to make sure that the pointing accuracy is correct, but it's slow. It doesn't work great for the mirrors far out in the field, and it gives you pretty limited information on how the mirror's actually performing. So it seems like an impossible task to actually measure these mirrors in the field. But that's where my work comes in. So what I've been working on for the past 6 years is what we call our non-intrusive optical, or NEO tool, that we send drones through the field to measure these mirrors. And it's non-intrusive because it doesn't interrupt plant operation at all. We can do this while they're actively tracking the sun. And how it works is pretty simple. We capture these images of the reflection of the tower in the mirror. And then if we know the position of the camera, we know the position of the tower, we know where the mirror lives in the field, and if we're able to identify where this reflection is, then at that point it just becomes a geometry problem. Then we can calculate the position of where, or the direction the mirror is pointing compared to where it should be pointing. So how we do this, we first have to go out to the desert. So we fly into Vegas. We do nothing in Vegas. We immediately drive 4 hours to Tonopah, Nevada, which is in the middle of nowhere between Las Vegas and Carson City, which is the home of one of the 2 commercial power tower plants we have in the US, which is called Crescent Dunes. It is also home to the world-famous Clown Motel, which we have never stayed at because my coworker refuses. I don't know if it's a coincidence that it's right next to a cemetery. And so then we go into the field and we take pictures of these big mirrors with our drone that Tucker lovingly calls this the pig. And some other cool pictures. You can see the frost in the morning on the mirrors. This is the best steel backing structure on the mirror. It's a trippy picture of Devin doing a reflectance measurement. And so we do that, and let's see if this is gonna work. Nope. Or it'll help. We get videos that look like this. So this drone is flying completely autonomously because we have to, right, remember these mirrors are moving throughout the day, so they're not stationary. So you have to precisely calculate where the drone has to be at any given moment to capture the reflection of where the tower is going to be. And this is the prettiest video that we've ever taken. So this is the one we put in all our presentations, of where we have these beautiful images of the tower traversing the surface of the mirror. And so we take all our pictures home and we put it into our algorithm. So we use a combination of machine learning and computer vision to identify the heliostat in the image. By doing that, we're able to calculate the camera position using a method called photogrammetry, which the premise is, right, we know the size of the object we're looking at, we know its dimensions, and we're able to find it in the image. We know what the parameters are of the camera lens and the sensor, so we're able to figure out what position the camera had to be at to capture the picture of the heliostat at that vantage point, and we can do that very precisely. We find that reflected edge, and then this gives us all the information that we need to get a surface air profile over the mirror. So as a queer woman working in renewable energy, I'm always striving to make my plots look as gay as possible. So I really like to use this aggressive rainbow color map in all my plots. But you can see here, green is what we want the mirror to look like. Green means it doesn't have surface air. Red means it's pointed too far in one direction. Blue means it's pointing too far in the other direction. We're missing some data on this mirror because sometimes we get these blocking effects. So in this case, this mirror, the bottom half was blocked, so we didn't get the bottom half, but this one looked pretty good. So this is the kind of data we're able to give plant operators so they can improve, in the control room, improve. There we go. And prioritize their resources to get the most out of these fields. So next steps for us, we're trying to develop this into a commercial product and not just a laboratory tool where someone could just plug and play and use this method to fly their own drones to measure their field. And we are planning a trip to Cerro de Minador in Chile this March to go and help them measure their mirrors because they got some bum mirrors out there and they need help. And what's next for concentrating solar power? So this technology area, its future is by no means assured. And I've heard a lot of different opinions on whether it's going to grow or even survive as a technology area, ranging from it's inevitable, it's like an only reasonable solution in a lot of cases, to trying to make CSP economically viable is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. So there's a lot of different opinions about this and a lot of renewable energy technologies, but the truth is that no one knows. Like, no one knows what our energy future is going to look like. People like to think they do, but they don't. Like, no one was going to predict that, PV were going to drop their costs so dramatically and then blow up. But what we do know is that we have a long way to go to decarbonization, and a big part of this unanswered question is how are we going to meet the gap in storage? Not capacity, but energy storage. Because fossil fuels are available when you need them. And things like the sun and the wind are intermittent. So we need to be able to have storage capacity, and it's not going to be one technology, it's going to be a lot of technologies. And I do think that CSP is going to play a big role in this. And there are also potentially some thermal applications of CSP. So we've been mostly just talking about power as the use case here, generating electricity, but concentrating solar also generates heat, which could have other applications. So industrial processes, mining, creating fuel, or other things like processing cement, food processes. So I'm going to leave you with my current favorite application of concentrating solar power, which is from Ken Armijo, who's also one of my favorite people in the world. He works at Sandia National Labs, and he owns a chili farm in New Mexico and likes to roast chilies. So on one of his days off, he decided to put his chili roaster on top of their tower at their test field and point some mirrors at it and make a solar chili roaster. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds for this technology. And I feel lucky to be in a position to help shape its future. All right, thank you so much.
Woo! All right. So cool. Wait, can you go back to the chilies? How hot are they getting?
Probably not that hot. Like, it's only, I think he just did the mirrors in the backfield there, so it's just like probably a few suns. It's not.
Whoa. I have the first question. Has a drone ever flown in the way of the reflection, and did it burn?
No,
Oh.
but we have crashed a drone before.
Whoa.
Not on a mirror.
Whoa.
Like that drone, the pig, the first time we took it out, it was like our last flight of the day, this drone here. Our very last flight, it was like about 100 meters up, and it just like lost a prop and just like plummeted to the ground, and we were just like, it was not fun. That's like you see your $25,000 drone. Just
Day's over.
Yeah.
Ready for some questions? Who has a question for Rebecca? We have one right here.
Once you get a map of the quality of the mirror, the good parts and the bad parts, what can you do with that?
So to some extent, you're limited. Like once mirrors are out in the field, it's incredibly expensive to try and go and repair them manually. So the big thing is like any adjustments you can make in the control room to help its pointing. Because to some extent, like there's some mirrors, if they're really what's called miscanted, when the facets are all out of whack. They can't calibrate them effectively. But I think, like Crescent Dunes, for example, like making adjustments in their control room, we're able to recover something like 10 to 20% of power by doing that. But to go out and actually fix these mirrors, it's like the idea, the goal of this technology is the mirrors are already calibrated correctly when they're in the field. Because by the time they're in the field, it's very difficult to fix them.
Ooh, we have one on the way back. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you need to know the drone position quite accurately? And if so, like how accurate?
Not when it's in the, so you do to do the calculation after the fact, but to get the drone position, if you get it within like a couple meters or so, that's the right position to get the reflection you need. Because like we can't measure the drone position that accurately. Like the GPS, if we got a more expensive RTK, we could, but the GPS maybe gets a meter accuracy. But when we back calculate the drone position from the image, we can get within like a few centimeters.
Crazy. Cool. We're gonna do the last one right here.
How do you keep the hot tank hot given thermodynamics?
Oh, I know less about thermodynamics, but I don't know. It's a really hot stuff, a lot of hot stuff, and it stays hot for a while.
It's so hot, it keeps hotting. Yeah. Amazing. Everybody give another round of applause for Rebecca.